Hello and welcome to my June wrap up. I cannot believe, you guys, that we are halfway through the year. And my reading in June was interesting, to say the least. I ended up reading 11 books, but I'm only going to speak about 6 of them because 5 of them were rereads and I don't have any inclination to speak about them. In case you're new, hi, hello, I'm Cassandra, and how my wrap-ups typically work is I'll talk through a couple of books, we'll have a little intermission where I'll do some journaling and kind of wrap up some of the events that I ended up doing this month, and then we will finish talking about the rest of the books that I had read. A little bit shorter in quantity of books, however, in volume of how long these books are, I read a lot this month. So without further ado, we're gonna start with one of my most anticipated books that I put on my TBR, not necessarily for it being like a new release or anything. This is kind of an older book. However, I, for some reason, was putting off finishing the Life Ship Trader series, and I was so excited to dive in and finally read Ship of Destiny, only for it to turn around and let me down. Guys, I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars. That's how much I did not enjoy this novel, which was really crushing because 1, I never go into books expecting not to like them, and 2, I had loved the series up until this point. And I thought at first that it was taking me a little bit longer to kind of get into the 3rd book. We end off on such a climactic point in the 2nd book that coming into the 3rd book, it was really finding the equilibrium and finding my balance again with the characters. As we progressed, however, I feel like Robin Hobb lost track and lost sight of all of the ambitions and the characters' drive that they had. It felt like I was following along with a completely different cast of characters. All of the characters' motivations seemed so out of place and just had a massive switch up compared to the first 2 books, and events that you had been looking forward to for 2 books at this point just ended up being such a letdown, and overall I am devastated by not liking this book. One of our characters is named Alethea, and she really is a core character and a main character in the first 2 books, and for some reason in the finale, she really took the sidelines. And I know I keep saying this, but I can't believe that once dragons got involved in this series, I stopped enjoying it. Although they were so interwoven and important to the story, for some reason, it really took away from the human characters the more we focused on the dragons. And as a massive shock to me, Malta, who is a character that is literally terrible, you guys, in the beginning of the book. She was easily my least favorite character in the beginning. She ended up being my favorite character in book 3. I loved getting to see her growth throughout the series, even though the first book, I literally wanted to just like shunt her through a wall. She was so terrible, you guys. And yet seeing her growth and her maturity was so satisfying, although very depressing, because how all of these characters grow is just through a lot of trauma. They go through it so much. And there is one event in particular that happens to one of the characters that is disgusting to read about, quite frankly. I was shocked that Robin Hobb went into the detail that she did. I felt it really was not necessary. If this event wanted to be placed in this book, I feel like it could have been placed in a more tasteful way, even though the event is extremely distasteful, mind you, and absolutely horrible. And from that point onward, that character changed, obviously, from the trauma. However, it also came with such a motivation switch that I felt like was not the right way to go about it. I feel like the changes should have been more internal, and instead I feel like we got so much like external change. I don't know if that makes sense. Again, I'm trying not to spoil anything while still giving like my thoughts on this, but it was such a disappointing end to the series. And I really hope that future Robin Hobb books do not end in such a dissatisfying way and ruin characters for literally no good reason. Didn't really mean to start off this video on such a negative note, but I've been so excited to share my thoughts on the Life Ship Trader series. I just wasn't really expecting not to enjoy Ship of Destiny. The next book I want to talk about is Roles and Rivalry by Christy Boyce. This is book 3 in this Dating and Dragons trilogy. I don't know if it has like an official like series name or not. However, this is a YA nerdy Dungeons and Dragons themed romance series, and we do follow various characters. Well, we do have some cameos from past characters woven throughout the series, as most romance series tend to go. I had no idea that this book was coming out or that it even was released, which is crazy because Dating and Dragons, which was book 2, was one of my most like anticipated releases from last year. However, that book ended up being a disappointment, but lucky for me, Roles in Rivalry did not end up disappointing me, and I feel like Christy Boyce refound her footing with writing YA characters, which was my biggest gripe from book 2. She ended up making these high school students feel very adulty, and hearing some of the dialogue come out of their mouth was unbelievably cringy and painful to read because it did not match the vibes of their characters. Yet, like I said, Christy Boyce found her footing once again with Roles in Rivalry. I ended up giving it a 4-star rating. It was so much fun to follow along Hazel and Max and their little like beef, their drama, their little high school drama. It's Hazel's senior year and she is on the color guard team and she's color guard captain, and her childhood best friend Max ends up moving back to her school and he's part of the drum line. So they're both in band together, and yet there's like a little bit of a rivalry between the drum line and color guard. They don't like each other. There's a lot of beef, there's a lot of animosity, and there's a lot of hijinks that all of these characters kind of get up to with like pranking one another's groups, and just the high school beef, you guys, was so funny. I actually was in color guard in high school and there was so much drama, but all the drama was caused by my band teacher to the point where I literally quit. Because tell me why a grown man was talking about me, trash talking me, mind you, behind my back to other students. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? Lucky for Hazel, that did not happen in this book, and her band director wasn't trash talking her with other students. So good for that. I loved Hazel and Max's dynamic. When it comes to childhood friends or like second chance romance, it sometimes can be really missed for me. This wasn't necessarily like a second chance romance, mind you. Hazel had a huge crush on Max in the past, and you know, their feelings didn't really come out until senior year of high school. But when it comes to childhood best friends, I feel like sometimes we lose the development of growth between the characters because all of their friendship and their closeness and their bonds and their memories, you don't get to see develop in front of you. They happened before the story even takes place. Yet how this was told, I feel like we got so much good tidbits here and there to really grow to understand their friendship, and also why they had a little bit of a falling out as well. And it was so fun to see them come back from that and to set aside their petty rivalries in the band and to grow to love one another. Of course, D&D is involved. They end up starting up a campaign, and it's Hazel's first time being the dungeon master. And I just know that if I read these books in high school, I would have absolutely eaten them up, you guys. It's the perfect level of nerdiness and romance and just like the dynamics of high school, while also having some really good life lessons as well. Hazel's DMing her very first Dungeons and Dragons game, and there's a lot of speak about like confidence, not only in like the D&D game, but also in band and stepping up and being a leader. And I just loved all those messages coming through. And I really hope that Christy Boyce continues to write more books, because these books are the type of books that I wish I had when I was in high school. And I think for a lot of like middle and high schoolers, this series would be a perfect series to pick up, other than the second book. The second book was no good, but the first and the third book, definitely so good. The third book really was a redemption for Christy Boyce, at least in my eyes, and I cannot wait to see what future books she ends up writing. A book that wasn't quite a 5 stars, I did end up giving it a 4.75. However, it was a book I could not put down, you guys, and I binged through this entire high fantasy novel in 3 freaking days. I don't know how I did that, but A Clash of Kings by George R.R. Martin was just super bingeable for me, and I had the best experience reading it. This is the second book in A Song of Ice and Fire, the second book in the Game of Thrones series. Now, I'm ready for the third book, you guys. I've heard amazing, amazing things about the third book, but even the second book, like, the politics are politicking, and I love a political high fantasy. It is literally straight up my alley. It is everything that I want and more in a book, and this book did not disappoint, you guys. What made my experience even better going into A Clash of Kings after reading A Game of Thrones was the fact that I finally watched the first season of A Game of Thrones. Never before seen, you guys. Never seen, not hardly any clips, no spoilers, all like, don't even know what the series was about before going into it, okay? So getting to read the first book and then watch the first series and then immediately dive into book 2, Wow, what a way to experience this world, and I am just so excited to continue reading and of course be left off on the cliffhanger that everyone has been left off on, and it's fine, you guys. But one thing I really struggled with the first book was parsing out who was who. There are so many characters you're introduced to in a Game of Thrones, and so many families and dynamics and alliances, and there's so much to keep track of. And having then watched the TV show, I now had names and faces, so it was so much easier to remember who was who, and I had the best time reading. Arya continues to be one of my all-time favorite characters. I loved her development, and I just know that she most likely will become a top favorite character of mine. Already 2 books in, she's gearing up for, I know, the most epic storyline ever, and I cannot wait to see that develop. I wish we got more Khaleesi chapters that weren't boring. I feel like most of the Khaleesi chapters in this book I just didn't really find interesting, but I understood why they were the way that they were and where things are leading to, because she has to get to the point where she needs to be. But there's some time that needs to pass before she gets to that point. So it all makes sense, but I found her chapters a little boring. However, one character that has really grown on me is Tyrion. He is such an interesting character, and there's many characters similar to him where they're very conniving and you don't know if you can really trust them and you don't know what their motivations are. Yet Tyrion is just on a different level when it comes to his plotting and his scheming, and I love getting to see some of his plans fall into place and how satisfying it was when he got certain revenge on characters. There were so many political maneuverings happening in this book, and it was so funny to me that, first of all, the name of the book is A Clash of Kings, which really makes sense because everyone in this book was like, actually, I'm king. I'm gonna be king, I think. And that was just the core of the story, was everyone saying that they were king and then the other kings being like, no, I'm the real king. And then going to battle and like fighting and like killing one another, and there's some magic getting involved as well, and just, guys, this book is so good and I cannot wait to read the 3rd book because from what I've heard, shit really hits the fan in the 3rd book, and it is a lot of people's favorite. I'm so excited, you guys, and I'm having the best time. I'm so happy I finally decided to pick up A Song of Ice and Fire this year. We are gonna take the brief intermission I mentioned earlier to do a little bit of journaling and also recap some of the very fun events that I did. I got to travel to a couple places, I had my last gymnastics meet, and I also made some bookish pages as well, so I'm very excited to share those with you. So let's go do some journaling and then I'll come back and speak about the rest of the books that I had read.
for a little flip through of all of the pages that I made, starting with my Clash of Kings page. I've really enjoyed my time reading A Game of Thrones to absolutely no one's surprise, and I love creating these pages for it. Then I went to New York and I got to visit my friend Blair. We sat down and we doodled around the city, and I also got to see my favorite band, The Warning, in concert. And Pow is actually the reason I started learning drums, so it was so cool to see them all live. I made a cutie little page for the Live Ship Trader series. I love the font on the covers, so I was so excited to incorporate that into my journal. I also went to Tennessee, and while I was there, went to Ancient Lore Village with my friend and my mom. We did archery, we did some impromptu sword fighting, I ran down a hill, we took pretty photos. It was an incredible experience, if not very, very hot. And then the reason for the Tennessee trip was actually my last gymnastics competition of the season. You're looking at the 4-time AAU national champion, and it was a delightful experience, and I'm so happy that I ended my first year back on such a high note.
I hope that you enjoyed my journaling. I don't think I mentioned this, but I set up my cover pages at the end of the month, and then for the beginning of the month, I'll set up like TBR pages. It just makes it more satisfying to design pages that perfectly fit all of the books that I ended up reading, and I really loved using these little boat stickers. You guys know how I feel about boats, so I really love how the page turned out. And now, back to bookish things. The next book is kind of out of left field, if we're being honest, and that is Super Nintendo, the game-changing company that unlocked the power of play, by Keza McDonald. I picked up this book a little bit on a whim. I don't even know what book I was looking for, but it popped up recommended on my library page. There's so many different libraries in Orlando that I don't actually visit the library anymore. I just place holds for books that I want, and then I just like pick them up from the library versus like browsing the shelves. Since the big library, you have to pay for parking, and I am vehemently against paying for parking, so I never go there. Anyways, tangent aside, this was just a love letter to Nintendo, quite frankly. It chronicled all of the Nintendo games throughout Nintendo's history, and also the early history of Nintendo. Like, I learned so many new things about Nintendo that I had no idea about, namely that they used to be a card manufacturer. I had no idea that that was like the start of their company, and it was like years and years and years ago, and that obviously when consoles first started coming out, this was recent. This was like I was gonna say the late 1900s, but that's so funny. The late 90s. Obviously that was in the 80s and 90s. I mean, also it's the late 1900s, but it's fine. All that to say, I ended up giving it a 3-star. It really was just like an average read for me. I'm not a huge gamer. I actually grew up watching my brothers play games, more or less. I did have, of course, the experience with Pokemon and Mario Kart and Super Smash, so getting to see those stories and history of those games was really entertaining for me. But when it came to covering games that I didn't really care about, I found my interest kind of waning, and the book actually opens with Mario, being that it's such a core character in the Nintendo universe, and yet I didn't really grow up playing Mario. My experience with Mario was Mario Kart and Super Smash Bros, so I didn't really feel any deep connection to the Mario lore, yet it was interesting all the same. And if we're being honest, it made me want to pick up and play some of these games that I never got to play, and yet I'm a terrible gamer, you guys. I am horrible, and I also just haven't really been prioritizing not working because I'm such a workaholic. So my goal after the summer, because I'm so busy in the summer, is to prioritize gaming and relaxing. And this book definitely gave me a list of ideas of games that I might want to give a try. A Ghastly Catastrophe by Deanna Raybourn is book 10 in the Veronica Speedwell series, which is a murder historical romance series that follow Veronica and Stoker as they develop their romance and also get up to a lot of hijinks and solve some mysteries. I love these characters so much. They're easily one of my all-time favorite like couples in all series, if we're being quite honest. Don't know how we got here, but here we are. And book 10 was such a good installment, and book 10 also means I'm finally caught up with the Veronica Speedwell series, which is exciting because now I get to experience new releases with everybody else and experience the hype on time. Well, this wasn't an absolute favorite read. I didn't quite give it a 5 stars. I did give it a 4.75 stars. It still was such an enjoyable read. Going into this book, I wasn't sure how I would enjoy it. I'm not really one for like spooky or eerie things, and the promise of a vampire was prominent in this book, and going into it, didn't know how I was gonna feel. But it turns out I do like the vibes and like atmospheric writing. If it's spooky, like, ooh, they're in this like decrepit old mansion, like how fun. Ooh, they're in like a graveyard. Love the atmosphere, but I just don't like being scared. So this book was perfect because all of the eeriness was all in like environment and atmosphere, and the mystery wasn't really tense or stressful, if we're being honest. We kind of had all of the suspects laid out on a silver platter just because the cast of characters was quite small. So the list of who the murderer could be, there wasn't a wide selection, and you kind of understood who was involved, yet the main core of the story and the main goal Veronica and Stoker were after was kind of proving who was doing it, because the vampire who was the main suspect straight up was like, yeah, no, like, I'm a vampire. So that's screaming guilty to me. I loved all of the Veronica and Stoker moments, and I cannot wait to continue to read about their stories in future installments, because Deanna Raybourn, 10 books in, says she has no plans to slow down anytime soon, which is delightful news for me. I only read one volume of manga last month, and that was volume 21 of Yona of the Dawn. Even though I said once all my library holds came in, I was gonna binge through all of them and I was gonna finish the whole series, and I read one volume, so little slower with the pace that I'm flying through this manga, but still 21 volumes in, not too shabby. I loved this installment. It was so good. There are two characters, and I don't want to say who, but if you've read the series, you know who I'm talking about. Every time they have an encounter, you guys, I am literally ecstatic. Ecstatic. It is so tense. And this was no exception, because the core 4 dragons actually got to meet and encounter this certain character, and I loved the tension, and just you have such mixed feelings about this character, and it's so good, you guys. It's so good, and volume 21 was no exception, and I cannot wait to continue reading on, and hopefully next month I will pick up more than just the one volume. However, the one volume that I did pick up was phenomenal. That was the last book that I ended up reading, but I will say, you guys, I did start The Lord of the Rings. So if you're looking for my thoughts and my experiences, fear not. A vlog will be coming very, very soon. I know so many of you guys have been so excited for me to pick up this book, but since I did put it on my June TBR, I did want to say that I did start it. I'm halfway through, and I'm having the best time. And I will give, of course, extended thoughts in my Lord of the Rings vlog, as well as my wrap up for next month, because I definitely will be finished reading it in July, I promise. I just talked a really big talk in my June TBR jar video where I said I was gonna read A Clash of Kings, Ship of Destiny, and Lord of the Rings, and those are all 3 massive high fantasy novels, and I just want to say, I did start it, okay? So I was halfway there. But that does wrap up all of the books that I read in June. I really hope that you enjoyed my thoughts. Let me know if you have read any of these books. Let me know if you're still mad at me for not finishing Lord of the Rings. And let me know what y'all have been reading and what y'all have been up to as well. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I do really hope to see you in my next one. Toodles!